Hey there, today we're diving deep talking about profit margins in medical staffing and what you can come to expect as a new business owner. To be honest, there's no one-size-fits-all type thing in this industry. However, there are definitely some strategies that you can try to implement to make sure that your profit margins are healthy and that you're setting your business up for success from the very beginning. Let's start out by understanding the profit margins. Profit margins in medical staffing will definitely vary a lot depending on a bunch of different factors, including the current pay rates, the client needs, and also the economic situation that's going on at the moment. Having said this, when we work with clients, we usually recommend them stick to the following formula. We recommend setting your bill rate somewhere between 1.5 to 2 times the pay rate you offer your staff. So what does this mean? If you, for example, have determined based on your market research that you would have to pay your RNs the rate of $50 an hour, you would be looking at billing the facilities anywhere from $75 to $100. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, well, why such a range? And ultimately, it really comes down to market conditions and your client's willingness to spend on this. Right now, with the economic situation being what it is, a lot of companies are cutting back on costs and really trying to be very conservative with how they spend their money. So understanding this is really gonna help you understand where you should fall into. And right now, given the current situation, this is being filmed in 2024, specifically September of 2024, you should try to aim and stick close to that 1.5 formula to try to get in the door. Anything very far from this is gonna make it difficult for you. Because if you bill a lot more than that 1.5 margin, given the current conditions, you're gonna find it hard to find payers and facilities willing to work with you. However, on the other end, if you try to stick to somewhere closer to that 1.3, which I know is something that a lot of consultants and people out there recommend nowadays, you would be really not making any profit. And I can make a whole video about this, but there's a lot that goes into the pay rates and the bill rates that you are billing facilities, because you charging $50 an hour, right? And paying $40, for example, does not mean that your business is making a profit of $10 an hour. That is just simply not how it works. As a business owner, you are gonna have a lot more expenses, right? Starting out with your operating costs, but also other costs related to the employment of that person. So think about workers' compensation, payroll taxes. All of these things need to be considered when you're setting up the bill rates. So going anywhere way under 1.5 is really gonna leave you at a tough spot. Now, when I say 1.5, don't let that fool you and think that that is gonna be your cap. We have recently worked with clients that, due to the nature of the facility and their high need for staff, they ended up even saying, hey, we're willing to pay more than that if you can find us people ASAP. So it really comes down to, again, the facility's needs. And although staying around that 1.5 margin is definitely how you should be trying to approach your initial rates, there's always gonna be room for negotiation. So make sure that before you set this in stone and give out your rates, you ask the facility first if they have an existing budget that they would like to stick under, so you can build a bill rate that will actually make sense for the both of you. Controlling what you can, pay versus bill. One of the most important things that you need to think about when starting this type of agency is making sure that you are controlling what you pay versus how much you're billing the facilities. These are the only two things that you actually have power over, and the two things that you're able to modify and play around to make sense. Even if you're in a situation where you cannot push your bill rate higher, you can still maintain strong margins by keeping your pay rate at a reasonable level and minimizing your operating costs. This means looking at your expenses like software, administrative support, office infrastructure, and anything else that you have going on as part of your overhead to try to streamline things as much as possible. You're gonna have to get really good at negotiating with both parties, right? So if you're ever in a situation where the facility says, hey, I'm not able to accommodate that rate, you can always try to adjust the pay rate ever so slightly while still maintaining sensible rates to try to make the whole agreement work. Now, something else that you need to consider when it comes to making good money in this industry is that, for the most part, you're gonna be relying on volume. Naturally, the more people you have working and the more hours these people are working, the better your bottom line is gonna look like at the end of the day. So one strategy I always recommend is setting yourself a revenue goal and working backwards from there. The way you do this is by figuring out how many hours approximately your staff would need to work to hit those revenue goals based on the average bill rate that you got going on at the moment. Because something that you also need to understand is that the bill rate might not be the same throughout all the different contracts that you get, right? Some hospitals might be paying more, maybe nursing homes pay a little less, and you make it work however you can, right? But the rates are usually not going to be flat for every single one of your clients. Now, let's work on an example considering a very common goal that I know a lot of people have going into it, and that is to hit $100,000 of revenue a month. To hit a $100,000 revenue goal with an average bill rate of $75 per hour, you need your staff to collectively work about 1,333 hours over that period. Now, let's talk about how many full-time placements that would require. Typically speaking, a full-time employee is working 40 hours a week. I know that when it comes to nurses, a lot of them are working 36-hour weeks, and that is considered a full-time if they're working 3/12s. But for the sake of the example, let's stick to that 40-hour a week average. To calculate the number of placements needed, take the total hours, 1,333, and divide it by the average hours worked per employee in a month. Assuming full-time work, that's 40 hours per week, or about 160 hours per month. So 1,333 hours divided by 160 hours per full-time employee equals roughly about 8.33 full-time employees, or full-time placements. This means you would need about 8 full-time employees working for your agency at 40 hours per week to hit that 100,000 revenue target in 1 month. Now, what does this mean? If you can place about 8 employees full-time consistently, this should definitely get you to the target. However, if you're struggling to make full-time placements, because sometimes the facilities simply do not have this level of need, consider supplementing by utilizing part-times or per diem staff that can also help you get to that goal. Now, let's go back to what I was saying before the example and continue talking about how to make sure that your agency is as profitable as it can be. Another thing that I always tell agency owners that feel like they're stuck, not really hitting their financial goals, is to try to broaden and expand their agency to also accommodate other specialties within healthcare that naturally pay more. If you're mostly focusing on general roles like CNAs or home health aides, then that is great. That is a great starting point. However, naturally, because those positions end up paying less, the margins for the agency also tend to be lower. And what you might end up finding at the end of the day is that the same amount that you can make off of 2 CNAs equals what you would make off of 1 RN working full-time. So yes, although the profit margin is the same, ultimately the work involved in providing the service would be lower because you would only be dealing with 1 person. So it means 1 person to run payroll for, 1 person to manage. So the amount of work associated with providing that service would be lower, therefore allowing you to perhaps even cut on some costs and keep your overhead low. So, if you feel like you're hitting a financial plateau, it might be time to expand your service offerings. Consider adding higher paying roles like nurse practitioners, physical therapists, or even respiratory therapists to your roster. These roles are also in high demand. By focusing on staffing more specialized and higher paying positions, you can definitely try to increase your revenue without having to change much in your day-to-day operation. It's really all about leveraging what you already have in place, but offering a broader range of services. Now that I've discussed a few strategies and different things that you need to know about setting your bill rates and making sure your business is profitable, I want to address something that comes up a lot. You would be surprised. This comes up a lot working with people that are just getting their agencies up and running. This has to do with making sure that the business is staying profitable long term, and that is avoiding to cut corners. I know I was just talking about making sure that the overhead is low, that you're keeping your costs down, but this does not mean cutting corners and starting to do unlawful things to try to make more money as an agency. What I've seen some people attempt to do is classify their employees as independent contractors or under the 1099 designation that allows them to get away with not providing workers' compensation or payroll taxes. While it might be tempting and it might seem like a good idea to save some costs when you're still trying to get things going, long term, it is not legal. Let's start there. It is not legal and also not sustainable because a lot of facilities nowadays are also requiring agencies make sure that they have the right classification for all of the people that are placed at their facility, that being W-2. Now let's look at how the IRS defines a 1099 worker versus a W-2 worker. The IRS defines a 1099 worker as an independent contractor who controls how and when their work is done, typically working for multiple clients. They usually handle their own taxes, including self-employment taxes, and don't receive benefits like health insurance or workers' compensation. On the other hand, a W-2 worker is an employee whose employer controls their work schedule, provides tools and resources, and withholds income taxes from their paycheck. Employees also typically receive benefits and protections like health insurance and unemployment coverage. So after having gone through this, you probably can totally understand that you as an agency telling the employee where to be at what time, managing their payroll, having a person to report to, that person is your employee. They're not independent, okay? So make sure that you are avoiding cutting corners by using this 1099 designation when that is technically not the relationship that you have with those individuals. So just to recap, focus on setting your bill rates between 1.5 to 2 times your pay rate to stay profitable. Nowadays, I'd recommend you stay closer to 1.5. Set clear revenue goals and calculate how many billable hours your staff needs to hit those goals. Consider expanding your roster to include specialized roles if you want to increase revenue without changing your existing processes. And finally, stick to good business practices, even if it ends up costing you more upfront. It's always better to pay the necessary taxes and ensure you're compliant with labor laws, rather than deal with the headaches and potential shutdowns that come with cutting corners. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, leave us a comment down below and let us know. Also, if you have any questions regarding these or other topics within medical staffing and home care, also leave them down below. It always helps us, it gives us ideas of what people want to see, and it allows us to create more content for you.